To be prudent. Okay, well, it's 1 o'clock.
I may end up doing it.
We'll begin the Plan Committee meeting of Akron City Council. There is no items that's up for public hearing today. Yeah, make a motion.
Motion to accept the minutes of the last meeting?
Is there a second? I'll second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. The ayes have it. Very good. Now, the first item that's on our regular list of legislation is the East End Community Entertainment District, which we had discussed last week in pretty good detail. Mr. Becker is here to answer any questions. I think we pretty much covered everything. So, is there any questions or comments at this time? Okay, very good. Short of no questions or comments, I'd like to entertain a motion that we favorable report with suspension of the rules.
Second of the motion?
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. The ayes have it. I will request time on 2, 3, and 4. 5, this evening we'll request that we file that. That's the petition for an apartment that we had already voted on Crozier. So we'll file 5, and then time on 6 through and including the balance of the agenda. We'll now move on to the new list of legislation. 1, authorizing conditional use to construct a garage at 1286 Woodward Avenue. Mr. Antonucci?
Recommend that be referred and advertised.
That's the petition for an apartment that we had already voted on Crozier. So we'll file 5 and then time on 6 through and including the balance of the agenda. We'll now move on to the new list of legislation. 1, authorizing conditional use to construct a garage at 1286 Woodward Avenue. Mr. Antonucci?
Recommend that be referred and advertised for a public hearing on next Monday.
Very good. Item number 2 is authorizing conditional use.
Hearing on next Monday.
Very good. Item number 2 is authorizing conditional use to a 3-unit development.
And advertised for public hearing.
Okay, very good. 3, authorizing conditional use to retain a used tire store at 1420 Copley.
Recommend refer and advertise for public hearing.
Okay. 4 is approving the sale of 60 Eleanor Avenue to Just G Limited Liability Corporation, determining said property is not needed for public use.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. This would be a buildable lot being sold to the adjacent neighbor. It would be at our standard pricing for buildable land. He plans on having a pear orchard.
Pear orchard.
Pear orchard.
Very good. Is there, is consent agenda okay?
That'd be fine.
Very good. Questions or comments?
Motion for consent.
There's a motion for consent. Is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. The ayes have it. That's item number 4. Item number 5, authorizing Director of Planning and Urban Development, after publicly advertising for bids, to enter into an agreement for title appraisal, review appraisal services, and acquisition relocation consultant services to carry out the community development program.
Thank you. This is ordinance we bring in every 2 years. It authorizes us to hire professional services. Right now we have our title work out for bid. We would ask for consent agenda.
Consent agenda okay?
Yes.
Very good. Questions or comments from anyone?
Motion for consent.
There's a
Okay, there's a question.
Councilwoman over here has.
Thank you, I saw that. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Sims?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the second section, it says amount specified in section 1. What is that amount for the contract?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Section 2 refers to the amount of the contract and referenced section 1, but I didn't see an amount, so I was asking.
I did not, I don't have in here, basically as needed for the projects. We only hire them, basically there's no caps If we need them a lot, we use them
So
a
it's
lot.
just like an open purchase order kind of stuff?
Basically, finance requires we encumber X amount of dollars, and then we go back, so it's not really an open one, but we only hire them as needed as projects come up.
Thank you.
Mr. Segedy?
And I just want to clarify, too, it is to advertise for bids.
Yes.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, there's a motion.
Motion for consent?
Is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. The ayes have it. Item number 6, approving the sale of city-owned property located at 526 South Main, otherwise known as the Bounce Building at Canal Place. Mr. Becker.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is a city-owned building. Right now, it's known as Bounce, used to be known as the Akron Accelerator down at Canal Place. And the city would like to sell that building to the Bounce board, as well as Doug Weintraub is here, the CEO. Mr. Angeloni is going to go over the terms of the sale for the committee here so you can understand it a little better.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Mr. Angeloni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. So generally speaking, the transaction is structured as a 10-year forgivable loan. So the purchase price of the property is based off of the county valuation of approximately $6 million. For each year that Bounce continues to operate the premises under the terms of the agreement, a proportional share of that purchase price will be forgiven. Ultimately, at the end of 10 years, the entire balance of the $6 million transaction will be forgiven. During that time, and in order to secure the city's interest in the property, the city will be requiring that a note and mortgage are executed in its favor. That way, if there is any type of default, the city will have a secured interest in the property itself. Those are sort of the basic terms of the agreement. If you have any questions or concerns, I'm happy to answer them in any way I can.
Very good. If our visitors would like to say anything, you're more than welcome to if you'd like to make any
Doug?
comments.
Would you like to?
I can answer any questions you might have about Bounce, but we're excited to be able to take over the building. We've operated it for the last 12 months and feel it's a wonderful opportunity for entrepreneurship. And our first floor build out is the Innovation Hub, which we hope to open on May 22nd. And all things are going forward from that perspective. We have well over 250 people that work in the building. There's about 50 businesses that operate there, and they come every day looking to businesses. So we're very excited about that. On our 5th floor, we run a accelerator, both for product development software and for sales and marketing. So we have 4 businesses right now that operate out of that, and we have a staff currently of about approximately 12 people that provide entrepreneurial services to all the companies in the building.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
We, first things first, I'm going to request of the committee that we take time on this so we have an opportunity to review the legislation. Also wanted to mention that this kind of fits in with our offloading of real estate, if you will.
Yes.
In terms of the maintenance, the annual maintenance liability on this. Is there an estimated time frame, or excuse me, not time frame, but estimated amount that we expend annually on the maintenance piece?
Yes. Last year we spent about...
Approximate average?
So last year, I think it was $60,000 total, and last year was actually kind of an expensive year for us. There were a couple things that broke down, HVAC on the 8th and 9th floor, and we had some issues in the basement that had to be cleared up. And that has been one of our most expensive years for a while as far as actual repair work. So.
Gotcha. Thank you. And the estimated value, Mr. Angelini had mentioned, is $6 million pursuant to the county records?
Yes, the appraised value is $6 million, $6.1 million according to county appraisal.
Very good. Well, do we, in this, this just seems like a natural progression. From what I understand, that more and more cities that have business incubator type, and please forgive for utilizing that old term, but business incubator type facilities like this no longer really own the assets where they're located, which kind of makes sense.
Right. What we found is, although, you know, Akron has been doing something like this since about 1983, first with the incubator up near Akron U, and maybe about 10 years ago trying to update and change to an accelerator kind of model. What we found in the last few years through, you know, part of one of the things that the Blue Ribbon Committee asked Mayor Horgan to do is take a look at everything that we're doing in economic development. How do we do it better? How do we modernize? How do we make sure that we move forward into, you know, best practices kind of thing? We have found that, and for lack of a better word, I'm going to use the incubator, accelerator word, that the best ones are being operated by small nonprofits that behave more business-like than a municipal or state government can. So we have a board that's made up of business experts and some business owners, and they're able to, you know, have a different kind of feel for how a business service should run compared to what you would imagine anybody in the city would be able to do. I mean, there are some people in the city with some business background, but, you know, not that much, and this gives us a better opportunity to give the services to those businesses that we hope, you know, would make them successful. So this is really the best practice today.
No, again, makes sense for the city to offload the real estate and have others be responsible for the maintenance and so on and so forth.
Absolutely, and as you were putting it, just even having them making the decisions as what should be done in those buildings is better off from a small group, small business perception versus having the city make the decisions on what needs to be repaired first or second or third, because we have different priorities than what a business would have.
Mr. Angeloni, question for you. So within this agreement, there's a 10%, excuse me, excuse me, reduction in that $6 million that's taken off for every year. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Each year that they operate in accordance with the terms of the agreement, a proportional share will be forgiven.
And then after that 10th year, then
the entirety of the balance of the loan would be forgiven at that point. But
it
it will be on a rolling basis. So year one, they operate, a tenth of the purchase price will be forgiven after year one and continuing on. And also I should mention too, and we talked briefly about an event of default. If there is an event of default, there's really a couple of remedies available to the city, one of which would be to request payment on the remainder of the note itself. So whatever balance is outstanding could request that. In addition, there is an ability to reacquire the property, would revest with the city. So in that point, we would take the building back. So those are a couple of remedies.
Over the years, the incubator has won national awards for the way we've done business and the success that we've had over the years in terms of helping startups and getting them launched and off the ground. And it makes sense in terms of, especially if this is one of the best practices out there to assist with this. Is there other questions or comments? Mrs. Mobian.
Yes. Thank you for allowing some more time for this. Let me ask you this. You're talking about 36,846 square feet. How much are we charging now for the square footage?
It's different for each business.
It's
based on, sometimes they may come in actually paying zero to start with. You know, our hopes are, everybody is basically under market rate. I mean, that's kind of the point of what we're doing there.
Oh, sure.
And we look at what their cash flow looks like, what they can afford, and we hope to make them pay as much as they can to, you know, as far as their fair share, but also strengthen them in such a way that they'll, you know, reach solvency and profitability and be able to graduate. You know, our timeline for them to graduate is hopefully 3 years.
Sure.
Which is a departure from some in previous years where we occasionally, well, I think we had somebody leave last year as we were making some of these changes who had actually been part of our incubation program for 18 years, and
Yeah.
it's time to
Yeah, thank you for that.
graduate.
I
Time
can't-
to incubate.
No, I understand it's incubator, and you don't want to, you want to help people grow and help. Let me ask you this, can you give us the information about the current occupants, what they're currently paying now? We can't get that?
I can give you certainly a list of who the current occupants are. Honestly, I'm not sure about what they pay, because we have it structured in such a way that we actually lease the building to Bounce, and then Bounce subleases with the idea that, in private industry, their financial records are often part of, their, what would be the term that I'm trying to look
So you're
for?
saying it's confidential information?
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. That, sometimes if their competitors know, too much about what their business is, that would be detrimental to them being able to operate their business.
Is there a way to share that with us in confidence, like an executive session?
I don't know. I would have
Can
to
you-
actually check with the Bounce board and, their director, and probably their attorney would want to weigh in on whether or not they're allowed to share that information. It kind
Okay.
of depends, I think, on the lease agreements between them and Bounce.
Sure.
There's probably some privacy issues there.
If you could explore it, that would be helpful. The other
Absolutely.
questions I have, I'm assuming that there's some kind of contract that's written up, or agreement. You said, you keep referring to the terms of the agreement. Are those terms available to us to see?
Yes, the contract is currently on file with the clerks.
Okay, could we have a copy of that?
Yeah, you should have it.
We have a copy? Okay, that'd be great to have, and hopefully we can ask some questions about it. But let me ask you this. Within the contractual terms, have we allowed for the movement that we are going into to help elevate Akron with terms that would be helpful to those minority businesses that we've excluded? Are there terms there for them to get into the incubator that would be helpful to them?
It's interesting. This is actually, somebody recently pointed out to me, is that the ability to be diverse is not the same thing as being inclusive. So there's plenty of language there that says, hey, everybody's welcome, but it's a whole nother step that says, we need to make sure that we as City Economic Development and Bounce as a board, that they are more active in reaching out to diverse communities to feel included, not just that, hey, you can come here if you show up, but how do we do that? And through that, one of the things that's something that Mr. Weintraub has been actively pursuing has been relationships with the Urban League, to make sure that their minority business assistance program is clued into Bounce and its assets and how they're available to everybody, and how do we make sure that people feel not just that, yeah, you can show up here, but we want you to be here and want you to feel welcome and comfortable and, part of this growing community. So that's a very good question.
Ms., I hate to tell you this, but I take issue with that comment. I don't know what that means, just showing up and being a part of being diversified. I think if we're talking about giving business building over to Bounce, and it's one of the economic drivers that we're looking to for this city, there needs to be something that spells out how we are going to be inclusive with that program. And everything we do, folks, cannot be going through the Urban League. I love the Urban League, and I know they've been very helpful to us, but when I talk to the Urban League, they're not getting enough resources, and they don't necessarily have the staff. Now, if something has changed, then maybe the Urban League needs to come to us and share with us the additional staff and the talents that they have to do all the things that we keep talking about them doing, because it cannot be the only source we use to help us elevate Akron. And as we talk about this, and perhaps we need to meet with the board or somebody from the board to talk about how can we have this included in this agreement. And I don't see this the same way you talked about it.
Right.
It needs to be, if it's the economic driver for this city, one of them, then it needs to be somehow thought through and inclusive of that. And
I
I'm
apologize
having a
in the way I
problem
said
understanding the terms that you've used.
Yeah, so I apologize because clearly, I think I'm saying the right thing, but it's not coming out exactly right. I've often found that, and this is why I like to use the two different words between diversity and inclusivity. Diversity seems like a word that's not as deep as being inclusive, where diversity just says that everybody's welcome, but unless you specifically reach out to somebody to make them feel, to actually reach out to them and invite them and say, please come, I want you to be part of this, and where can I meet you? At what place do I need to go, you know, to see to make sure that you as a minority feel comfortable in being part of this? And that's our connection with the Urban League, has been not for them to necessarily provide any of the expertise, because you're very right, they're understaffed, especially the business, the SBDC that's there and staffed by and funded by the state. But how do we use the expertise that we already are putting there in Bounce, that is now being funded by the state as well as, you know, the city, and being supported in Northeast Ohio? But how do we use them, that expertise that is available, how do we make sure that you're really reaching out to people of all kinds of different cultures, nationalities, colors, whatever, and say, we want you to be here, and what do I have to do to make sure that you're welcome?
But let me just say this, and I can pass it on back to the chair. Essentially, I think we've gotten more confused when we start throwing inclusivity and diversity and all these other terms around. All I'm saying to you and to this council is that we need to have a system in which we can show that there are minorities who have opportunities to go into businesses like this, develop their business, and to show how we are being supportive in helping them grow the business. That's what I'm talking about. So however you want to label that, you can. But when we start giving away buildings like this, where you have the so-called, I'm still very old-fashioned, the incubator, which is to grow a business, it's always my understanding of it, then it seems to me that embedded in your agreement should be ways in which we're doing more outreach to those individuals in those communities that have been excluded. And if we can't do that, I would love for somebody to tell me how we're going to do this, because all I keep hearing is Urban League. Urban League is great. I love the Urban League, and with that rich history and all the things that they have done and will continue to do. But I need to know that if we're dependent on the Urban League to help us do this work, that there's somebody that's providing them with the resources and make sure that they have the talented staff that's able to do it. Because when I talk to them, they can't give me a report to tell me what they've done and to show us how they've increased the numbers and provided those individuals with the support they need. Because those are the kinds of things we keep hearing. It is the support that a lot of these businesses need in order to stay afloat, to grow, and all of that. You know, the ones that we use for the CSO project, they came in here, they were having problems with the paperwork. And so we started talking about the Urban League helping them with the paperwork. When I talked to the representative from the Urban League, they said they couldn't do it. They didn't know all that stuff. So we need to do more than just throw out the Urban League folks. You know, if we're going to start giving away $6 million property over the years, embedded in that agreement, I think it should speak to what are the terms of the agreement and how are they going to help us grow this city so it is inclusive, diversified, however we want to discuss it, but that we are showing that we are helping every segment of this community grow and develop. Thank you.
Mr. Sawarski?
Well, just, Mrs. Roth, I appreciate what you said about a passive approach, waiting for people to attend, versus an active approach, which I think is the same thing that Mrs. Amobian is talking about, where there's a strategy of outreach to make sure there is connection with the minority community and recruitment and involvement and ultimately collaboration. And I appreciate that you favor that approach, and as opposed to sort of waiting for people to attend. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the $6.1 million assessment, does that include the, I don't know, $1.5 million renovations on the first floor?
Yes.
Is that all included in there? So currently, as a city, outside of the $60,000 we provide in maintenance, what other resources do we provide to Bounce?
We have been providing some match funds to the Jumpstart funding that they get from the state. They get about $1 million, just 900, little over 900,000 from the state. And in order to make all their matches, we provide some matching money in their utilities fund, about $150,000, and then about 125. So a total of 276 is what we provided last year, and we'll probably provide that close to that again this year.
So $276,000 we currently provide to help support Bounce.
And this is the last year that we'll be doing that.
Okay. So in addition to having a reversion provision in the contract, attorney, you can help me with the verbiage if I get it wrong, that allows us potentially either to get the building back if we fail in the contract, or to request the balance of payment? Is that where you're?
Yeah, and actually, the remedy is not either or, it could be both. Typically, in that type of scenario, if in fact it did default for whatever reason, it probably would not be operating. In that event, it's unlikely that it would have cash reserves available for us to make a demand for the payment of the note, but that is an option. So we have retained both rights. So we could demand the remaining balance on the note, plus take the building back.
Okay. So I'm going to ask to, and perhaps my friend who took me on a tour and then let me put on glasses, currently, do we have the number for minority businesses that are currently in the incubator, but specifically black businesses that are in the incubator? Do we have those numbers currently? We have 50 total. Do you know what the number is of it? Enough. Any guesstimations maybe?
If you can get back to it, with all respect, Representative Sims, there's been a couple of things that have been brought forward. That's one question that we'd like to have answered throughout the week, if that's with all respect.
So I only asked him, sorry, Mr. Chairman, because he asked if he had any questions that we could ask him, and so no disrespect to. So if we could get those numbers, because I too would have to concur, and I do appreciate Adele's heart, even if the verbiage didn't come out quite the way you would have desired. But Councilwoman Amobian's point, as entrepreneurs, as we look more and more to entrepreneurship and look at what our economic drivers are, and look at Elevate Act and look at some of the exclusions, that we would be intentional in that aspect with writing that in as part of the conditions of the contract, to make sure that we're not having to guess at the top of our head what's there, to make sure that we're earmarking that to ensure that would be, I think, super helpful and go a long way with helping us try to address on the front end some of the challenges we're trying to redress currently on the back end. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Swirsky?
Well, just, there's been a lot of good questions about the actual numbers in the sheet that we were provided. I don't even know if you guys know, but there's no numbers here. So it's a good starting point for discussion, but for the next, by the next meeting, if we could get this ahead of time too.
So this uniform council report that is required for each piece of legislation requires us to put how much we intend to spend, like what will be encumbered, what kind of cash will come out of the city for this particular project. And in this particular project, since we are not actually spending any money and also not receiving any money, potentially if everything goes well, really the number there would have to be zero, at least on this particular report. These other numbers, like listing the number of businesses, et cetera, that's something we can certainly gather that information and send it to council over the week.
Right, I mean, maybe the format for this isn't appropriate for this
Yeah,
specific situation, but, you know, an alternative fact sheet or something, you know, that explaining that the 10-year forgivable loan, it's a $6 million transaction, just sort of an overall financial sheet, whatever format you guys want to use so that we can understand it and make a good decision on this.
Further questions or comments? Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry for my tardiness. I heard you said that there isn't any cash exchange or value because I guess it's being donated, but can we have an idea of when we first acquired the building, was the building given to us, or did we make a purchase of the building at any time?
So we actually, the county fiscal's office, is doing some research on, you know, tracking the deeds to figure out exactly like how they transferred from who to who. And all I can give you is a very, you know, basic memory from 1984 when I worked for planning, where B.F. Goodrich had gone out of business, sold much of that complex, some of it to Uniroyal, some of it to Michelin, you know, different parts, some of it was spun off into Omnova, you know, different things. And my understanding was that we received that building for $1 after B.F. Goodrich took all the asbestos out. We're trying to track the deeds to see exactly, you know, what the path was, but that's my memory from that time.
It would be helpful if it was, because that was one of my concerns. It was good to find out from you that they did the asbestos removal, and that wasn't an expense on our end. But if there was any expense on our end,
for the purchase,
as far as for purchase, remodeling, anything that was invested in the building, that would be good to know, because even though that would let us know if truly it's just an exchange, or if we had some money tied up at in some other time.
I'm sure we do. I mean, we've owned it for a super long time, and it's been under our responsibility in terms of elevators and maintenance and roof and everything across the board, and there has been investment over time. I think what we're looking for is for this entity, for this city to be a little bit more leaner in terms of offsetting all the all the real estate assets that we continue to pour money, but with ours.
No,
just to let you know, that's.
I understand that, but we have been doing a lot of write-offs, so to speak, and to know the real cost, it would be good to have those numbers.
So one of the things that the county does when they appraise a building, whether it's owned by the city or even a homeowner, in fact does take into account those kinds of improvements that are made over the years, because as property, as the land value, for instance, might appreciate as other properties around it appreciate, buildings both appreciate and depreciate at the same time, because when you put a roof on, it's good for 20 years. So every year you're losing 1/20th of the value of that roof, because, you know, in year 20 you're going to have to put a new roof. So when the county does an appraisal, they would take into account the fact that in the 90s there was a passenger elevator built. We actually built it with federal money from the Economic Development Administration. I'm sure there was probably some expenses on our part in engineering, but, you know, but that investment went into the building, and now 10, 15 years, or well, 20, I don't know, it seemed like 1990 was not that long ago, but over the years, the value of that investment, you know, has decreased. There's still value in that elevator because it's still functioning, we know that, but the main part of, you know, that value would be the fact that, you know, it's depreciated over time. So the $6.1 million sort of takes all that into account, both what's been invested in the building like very recently as well as investments that might have been made 20, 30, 40 years ago. So they take into account both depreciation of just the fact that it's more valuable to own land today versus, you know, 1980. It also takes into effect that improvements that were made over the years, you know, have a big value right when they're made and then depreciate as they sort of wear out.
Mr. Seg,
Yeah,
I saw it right there in front of me.
hiding in plain sight. I just wanted to add to something you said, Councilman Fusco, too, that I'm sure we'll get council the information pertaining to this specific building that was requested, but following up on what you said, kind of stepping back to the global view that, you know, the city owns this building, the city owns the water plant, the sewage plant, the Stubbs building, our maintenance facility. We own a lot of real estate and a lot of buildings, so I think what's great about this proposal is not only does this go to Bounce and to help entrepreneurs and so forth, but there are significant maintenance liabilities that the city has to maintain all of these other buildings that are our mission critical services, which we will continue to do. So we can definitely get council the information requested about this, but I think stepping back, the administration does feel this is a good this is a good thing for us. We align Bounce with its strengths, and we continue to maintain the buildings that we have to.
No, I agree with that. And I have to believe, and I'll ask a question, I don't see anyone here that can answer, but I have to believe with this mission that you just mentioned, you know, we're offloading a lot of real estate. I have to believe in terms of our bond rating and that it would have a positive impact on that piece of it. Because again, like I said, there's 60,000, whatever the number is in terms of annual maintenance that goes into this. You know, that responsibility is going to be carried over. But then again, this asset's going to be able to be utilized by the folks from Bounce, and that makes sense. And we do. We have a number of questions pending right now that we need to have the answers to this week. And I agree in terms of the Elevate Akron, and that we all need to be pulling together to see through it, to see to it that those lessons learned can be learned, just that, learned, and then move the city forward. Mr. Swirsky.
Gotcha. Well, I was afraid I wasn't up front. Just, I would assume you already have, somebody has a list of success stories of companies that we've helped and that are now serving our community, rewarding us with increase in taxes, other employment.
Absolutely. Every year we report on Bounce's impact on the city. We reported it as Akron Global Business Accelerator and as the Akron Incubator. So the Akron Annual Information Statement every year carries both the number of jobs that are at that facility and created during that year, and the total amount of payroll that's been created that year. So it has had an impact and is continuing to grow.
Could that list be provided to the community?
Sure. I mean,
yeah.
Would you like it like tabulated, or just like pull out that page from?
Would there be a list of examples and the jobs that they produce and the taxes they pay? And
well, it's a basic summary. Every year it doesn't list like individual companies unless there was like some really special story about a particular company that, you know, did something. So we can look for the particular companies, but most
just
of
some
them
way
are
to show the
here.
benefits to the community.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it would be interesting also, I think, to do a look back of like 10 years to see where they're at today. I think that's what you're kind of getting to was, because a lot of them, we've seen out there, they're employing people all over. So with that, we'll now, Ms. Sims.
Just a concluding remark. The overall premise, I guess we all get whenever we can take some of the burden off the city, particularly these older buildings and having them to do maintenance. But I think this particular building is made more unique by the fact that it houses one of our prized future economic drivers. And so I think we have to pull that outside of the pack and try and look holistically at the piece to see at what point in this transaction we can interject some good policy that helps us to address a social challenge in our community, which is a part of Elevate Akron. So, you know, to emphasize our understanding of the need, but also to be mindful of a greater challenge that we have where there is a deficit in a certain segment of the population having access to economic development opportunities. And so I would ask for us anytime, not just in this project, but anytime when we have opportunity to negotiate, to be looking at it through that lens. So I too thank you for taking time and look forward to continue to discuss.